One thing about life is that we're all at one point or another, or multiple times, going to have situations where we're dealing with really difficult situations. And we will be in positions where we will be dealing with people who are dealing with difficult situations. Peace and love, family. I'm Royce Fletcher Thomas, and the host of the Sunday Hope and Healing Session. We're glad to be here with you every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And we do this as an opportunity of spreading hope and encouragement and love and insights to be able to help us all to be the best versions of ourselves as we're endeavoring to enter into a sustainable state of supreme satisfaction. That's ultimately what all of us want. And we go about that in different ways, frequently settling for temporary satisfaction that's certainly not sustainable and that often leaves us, wanting for more, right? It's not ultimately satisfying. And so we do that through different things that I share, insights that I've been blessed to gain along my life journey. A lot of times, people see things about me and, encourage me to share things from, based on places that I've been fortunate to get to. And we share, like I said, insights and share things that hopefully bring you some level of encouragement and hope. And we also actually provide healing as well. And we do that through a methodology referred to as Transcending the Matrix, which is a holistic based approach to really address any and every aspect of a person's life, their physical health, their mental and emotional well-being, all areas of a person's life. And so very happy to be able to do that, even though there is very much a part of me that would love to be resting today. I've just gotten back from traveling, gotten home in the wee hours of the morning, plus daylight savings time. Anyway, so today our topic is really dealing with, and we're going to do some healing on this too, is dealing with how to deal with people who are dealing with difficult situations. And so I indicated I just got back. I got home at 1 something this morning, which was effectively 2 something this morning because of daylight savings time that kicked in this morning. I actually watched the clock move from 1:59 to 3 o'clock this morning. But there were kind of a couple things that sparked this. So I was out of town to support a dear friend whose son made his transition, and had some responsibilities with that. But also it had me thinking about, several situations where I have personally encountered people who were dealing with difficult situations and heard about stories they experienced with other people while they were going through difficulties. And sometimes there were situations where what the person said just really didn't help their situation at all. And I had conversations with the brother, shout out to Eugene Mason III, who we were having, he was at this homegoing as well, actually the godfather of the person who made their transition. And we were having some conversation, and he shared that that it would be, that he felt like it would be useful for me to share some things to help other people understand and be able to grow in the area of dealing with people who are experiencing perhaps the loss of a very close loved one or other situations, right? And so we're going to do that today. We're going to talk a little bit, and we're going to actually offer some healing as well. And so definitely to everybody who's out there today, from my heart to yours, I'm sending a bunch of love in your direction, praying that that love reaches you wherever and however you need it to reach you. Okay. And so let's kind of get into this topic a little bit today, and we'll see um, how this might be able to benefit you in your own life journey. Because as we started off, what this, I'm a minister and I'm a vessel of healing, right? I happen to be the person who this methodology of transcending the matrix came to the earth through, right? And so it's something I'm very, very passionate about. But one of the things that I've discovered along the journey, not initially, but one of the things that I've discovered along the journey is how this is really a significant pathway in terms of opening up our spiritual eyes to be able to see things much more differently, to be able to operate more purely from a place of love, and really also as a significant approach to address our own spiritual growth, development, and unfoldment to help us to be self-actualized human beings and ultimately reach that sustainable state of supreme satisfaction. Ultimately, all of us want that. We just frequently don't know how to get there. And we a lot of times find ourselves just kind of fumbling in the dark a lot of times in a lot of ways in our efforts to get some satisfaction and some sense of real, true happiness in life and fulfillment in life. Oops. Sorry about that. That's my alarm that I have set. It goes off before it's time to start the Sunday Hope and Healing session. Apparently it snoozed and said stop. But I'm curious for you all. I'm curious about what have been some of your experiences in terms of if you have someone that you're interacting with who's experienced some sort of loss or dealing with some really difficult situation, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a death, whether it's, you know, there are a lot of people right now who are losing their jobs, whether it's something like that. There are different life experiences that can, in many ways, turn our lives upside down. And some of us don't really necessarily know how, and sometimes we even think we do. We're doing the best that we know, but we don't necessarily have the tools all the time to know how best to respond to somebody else when they're dealing with a really difficult situation. And, you know, I'd love to share some things that might be able to, assuming that if you're here on the Sunday Hope and Healing session, there's already somewhere that you are in your mentality, okay, to even want to come to something like this. You wouldn't even be attracted to it. There wasn't already somewhere that you were in your mindset, in your thought processes, in your spiritual development, quite frankly. So there's some things that I'm going to just kind of start with the premise that you do actually want to be able to support people in a meaningful way. You do actually want to be able to not make their pain all about you. You do want to be able to love on them in a way that they can, not only in a way that they can feel, but in a way that makes a difference for them, that helps to lighten their load, that helps them to know that they're not alone in the difficult situation that they're going through, whatever that might be. Okay. Now, again, part of what sparked this was the situation of the last few days of, you know, that I've experienced supporting this this dear friend of mine in terms of the transition of his son. And let me say, I know a few people, I know several people actually, who are a part of a group that nobody wants to join, and that's those who've had to bury a child. You know, I'm thankful that I've at this point still not had to bury a parent even, or a sibling. Um, and many of us have had to do that. And those aren't easy things either. I'll focus a little more on the parent aspect. Like we expect that our parents will go before us, even though it's not easy. We can make sense of that in our minds because on some level, we kind of know that at some point that day is going to come, right? Even though we don't want it to come, we know at some point it's going to come. Same with grandparents, aunts and uncles, people who are older than us for sure. Sibling, that's a little bit of a different experience. But to bury a child, that's a whole different experience altogether, because psychologically, it's not supposed to happen that way. Psychologically, we think that it's our job to keep our child or our children safe, to protect them, and we expect that one day they will be burying us and they will be tending to our arrangements rather than the other way around. And so I want to first of all recognize, and do in part because of the number of times that I've had people that I care about who've laid an offspring to rest. And I can't say this like I know what it's like from experience, because I don't, but I do understand that it's something that nobody who's experienced it can really fully relate to, no matter how many times you've had to deal with death or loss. It's a very unique experience. And in general, I think that people have difficulty or feel awkward or uncomfortable about dealing with death. I think that on some level, perhaps subconsciously, it kind of may force people to kind of deal with their own mortality, which in general tends to feel very uncomfortable for people. Also, people don't really know frequently how to deal with people who are in pain, period, or who are experiencing loss, period. It feels very uncomfortable to see somebody else in a lot of pain. And so, just kind of generally speaking, people have a lot of kind of visceral responses to other people's pain. One approach that they take to other people's pain is to distance themselves from it. People that they see are really going through, they kind of stay away from them. Sometimes one approach is that people will stay away from them because it feels uncomfortable. It makes them feel uncomfortable and they don't like that. And they don't know what they can do to help. That is a thing too. They don't know what they can do to help, so they just kind of stay away. Another thing that people will often try to do is try to solve their problem. There's some situations that people go through that there's nothing that you can say that's going to make them feel better. I don't care what it is that you say or how true what you say might be, it's not going to make them feel better. So I want to encourage you, please don't, if you have someone in your life who's experiencing the loss of a loved one, please don't tell them they're in a better place now, because the reality is that you're saying that to make yourself feel better. It's not going to do anything for them. It's not actually going to do anything for them. Some people, depending on, your faith background, may want to, quote scriptures to them. Please don't tell anybody the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away when they're experiencing the loss of a loved one. There's nothing that's going to do to help them. Sometimes people will, just say things and maybe even end up with diarrhea of the mouth themselves because they just feel awkward. And it's not a fault of them in terms of them being bad people. They just don't know better, don't know what to do. It's a difficult situation to navigate. and so don't know how to handle it. And sometimes you just will do that by, just talking a lot. And then the person who is dealing with the difficulty has to expend more emotional energy listening to you. Okay. And sometimes I've seen this on a number of occasions. I remember when my grandfather passed. My grandparents had been married for 65 years when my grandfather passed. And I had the responsibility of being, not only of eulogizing my grandfather, which was interesting in itself, but also of being with my grandmother. I was the one sitting next to her. I was with her the whole time. And I remember, and it's understandable for people at a funeral to come up to a person and, want to say something, want to acknowledge them. But I remember, there were moments, there's one in particular that comes to mind, of where, someone is, there with my grandmother, didn't have anything like the relationship with my grandfather that my grandmother obviously did. But this person is there crying, and it's like my grandmother is now needing to console this other person who's not family and wasn't particularly close to my grandfather regarding the transition of her own husband. And, kind of had to get her moving along because that's not a position that a person should be in. In yesterday's experience, this actual homegoing celebration of life took place yesterday. And the person who passed is a young man, early 20s, just 22 years old. And there was a friend of his who was there, a recent friend. He hadn't known him very long, but he definitely wanted to be there, to honor his friend's memory. And he was there. And, for young people, it's the longer you live, the more death you experience, the more people you see leave, the more it occurs at a more rapid pace, the longer you live. It just works out that way. But this also was a very young man, and, he's at a point talking to his friend's mother, the one whose child recently passed. And, and he breaks down, with her, and he starts crying and everything. And, I quickly said, you don't need to deal with this. And I took him, and then I was just with him, because the person who's really, really, really close to it doesn't need to be given the added responsibility of trying to comfort somebody else who's dealing with their close loved one's transition. And even with that young man, understandably, he's got some feelings about this friend who he apparently liked a lot and felt close to, about him leaving. And, it's odd just for somebody really young to pass anyway. But, that wouldn't have done any good to him to have scolded him about, why are you putting that on his mother? Don't do that. That wouldn't have helped him, because he also was grieving and dealing with the difficulties. There wasn't a lot I could have said to him either. I just put my arm around him and walked away with him. And we walked, and then we end up getting to a point where we just stood there, and I just had my arm around him and didn't say anything. Didn't say anything because oftentimes there's nothing that you can say that's going to make somebody feel better. Oftentimes, what people really need is presence. Presence. I didn't really say anything to this young man. Not at this point. I had said something to him earlier in the day. But at this point, when he's having this difficult moment, I didn't really say anything to him. I was just present with him. And afterwards, he thanked me. He got out of his system what he needed to get out. He let those feelings come up. Kudos to him for doing that, actually, because it's better for it to come out than for them to be suppressed. And he really appreciated that happening, right? There is a situation where a person, his 9-year-old daughter, passed. And, he later shared with me, he's been a guest on the Sunday Hope and Healing session. He later shared with me that when his daughter passed, and, and I showed up to the hospital and stuff, when his daughter passed, he said, I didn't really say anything, but that my presence there, he really appreciated that. And I kind of the undertone of it was he appreciated that I didn't feel a need to fill the space with words, but just was there with him. And I can't tell you the value. And now, granted, I've been doing this a long time. I'm a minister. And so I've dealt with a lot of people who are dealing with and have dealt with people who are no longer in the earth realm, who've left the earth realm. And generally speaking, it's not an easy experience for people. And it doesn't necessarily feel comfortable to just sit with somebody else in their pain. That's what holding space really is. Just being there in the space with another person, holding the frequency of love and support. And that frequently requires no words. I'm going to say that again. That frequently requires no words. When this friend whose son transitioned recently, I called him the day that it happened. His wife saw, who it was calling, and she answered the phone. And, said that he wasn't in a place to talk. Understandably, I'm sure that he had spoken with several people that day already. They probably wanted to know what happened. To this day, I still have not asked them what happened. Because would that do something for my curiosity? Yes. But what's my real purpose in posing that question? To satisfy my selfish curiosity? Because it certainly wouldn't have done anything to help them to have to regurgitate it yet again. No doubt they've had to tell the story multiple times. And there are different times where different little things were shared. I was able to get some more specific details. But, another friend, remember having a conversation, and she was talking about a difficult time, and I believe it was the loss of a loved one with her in this particular situation. And she was saying that people were telling her, "Oh, I'm sorry," or whatever. And I really do believe that people mean well. And this was a lot of insight that I gained from even this conversation with this one friend. And she said that when people do that, they're really not. They might think that they are, but they're really not doing that to help you, the person who's experiencing the loss and the pain. They're really doing it as a way of coping with their own discomfort. They're saying stuff to manage their own discomfort. It does take a certain level of mental strength, emotional maturity, and spiritual growth to be able to just be with somebody, to be able to just be present with somebody, to just hold space. It doesn't necessarily feel comfortable because you want the natural inclination is to want to fill the space with words. A lot of times people don't feel comfortable just holding space with someone, so they'll want to fill the space. But what's needing to happen, the magic of holding space with someone is creating an environment where there's space for what they have on the inside of them to be able to come out, rather than all of that energy being stuck inside of their body and them not really necessarily knowing how to maneuver and manage that, how to handle that, how to get that energy moving. Because frequently people don't give them the space to let the energy move. But holding the space creates space, just showing you're there. By the way, one of the things that I found to be one of the most meaningful things you can actually say to somebody who's really dealing with difficulties is letting them know that you're there. You know, when I spoke with my friend's wife the day that their son passed, you know, it's kind of odd because, again, you don't really know what to say. But I essentially just said, and I know this is difficult. I get that he, you know, that he's not wanting to talk right now. I just want you all to know that I want to be here for you however I can and however you need it. Whatever way I can show up to help lighten your load, you know, I'd like to do that. And that was about it, right? Sometime later, not that same day, you know, sometime later, I reached out to my friend via text and said, you know, I know that you still might not be ready to talk, and I just kind of reiterated what I had said to his wife. I realized you still may not be ready to talk, but just know that I love you and want to offer support in whatever way would be meaningful for you, right? And then that gives them a space, and they may not even know what that is yet, but it then gives them a space to say, okay, yeah, this is an area where I can probably use some support, okay? Because folk don't even always know what they're needing in that moment, but I know that what people frequently want is to be supported in some way, right? To be supported in some way and being available. You know, there's this thing in sports, you know, where they say the best ability is availability, right? No matter how talented of an athlete you might be, you know, that's no good if you're out injured or whatever. And so the best ability is availability. And so that goes true in relationships. It goes true in dealing with people who are experiencing loss or whatever kind of difficult situation. You know, several years ago, when I was living in Houston and Hurricane Harvey came through and ended up having to start over completely from scratch. There's very little that I have today that I had before August of 2017. You know, even as I would share with that, you know, people didn't know how to deal with that. And yeah, it was just kind of odd feeling. Yeah, it was an odd experience. But one of the things that is true is that if you're a spiritually focused person, if you're a person who desires to show up as love and light, and I believe that if you're here on some level you do, if you're a person who wants to be a light in the world, who wants to be able to show up in people's lives as love, then I commend you, first of all, for having that mindset and that heart posture to even want that in the first place. And secondly, I think it's real useful for us to be able to have tools to be able to do that effectively. Because if your heart wants to be there and wants to support, it's best that your mind has the tools of how to go about that the right way. And if you are a person on a spiritual journey, being there for others is part of the journey. It's a requirement. There's just no way of getting around that. Being spiritually mature and showing up for others, just it's part of the deal. It's part of the deal, right? And so there was something that the Master Jesus said that was powerful, and it was transformative teaching. He said, the way that you really gauge one's greatness is directly tied to their commitment to service. How great you are is determined by how well you serve, right? The heart with which you serve and the impact that you're able to have in the process of serving. We think of serving as something that's beneath, and who's being served as being above, when reality, according to this statement of Yeshua, Jesus, that the true mark of the greatness is you're serving with a glad heart, and you're serving in a way that's actually making a difference in somebody else's life. He did this when he was, foot washing in a church service isn't the same when somebody took a bath and they're walking around with socks and shoes on. That's not the same as a situation where 2,000 years ago, where people are walking in the dirt on unpaved streets and the dirt with sandals on. It's not the same. It's not the same thing. But what he was demonstrating in that moment was allowing himself to serve someone else and demonstrating that, he wasn't maintaining that his greatness was determined by how large of a crowd he could get when he spoke, but by this commitment to service and wanting to make a favorable impact in the lives of other people, in the lives of as many people as possible. And so, as we endeavor to be these spiritually mature, enlightened beings who are endeavoring to enter into a sustainable state of supreme satisfaction, part of that requires us to deal with our own uncomfortability. Guess what? I didn't have a close personal relationship with this young man that just passed. But you know who did? His father, his mother, his brothers and sisters, his grandmother, his aunts. And so it wasn't about how comfortable I felt or how uncomfortable or how comfortable or how uncomfortable I felt. It was, how might I actually be able to comfort them in a way that feels comforting to them? Whether that's fixing a plate or any of the things that I did during the weekend, there were more official responsibilities. And granted, everybody's not necessarily going to be asked to lead those things, but I did make it very known that I wanted to support in whatever way I could, in whatever way they needed. And that was something that I believe was clear to them. And they found spaces where it would make a difference for them, for me to show up. And I was glad to do that. I was glad to do that. And if you, from a really sincere, heartfelt place, are offering that, not necessarily offering a whole lot of other words behind it, you know, people will be able to find ways for you to be able to help them in a way that is meaningful for them. All right. Now, I've done some talking. Let's actually do some healing now to help open up spaces within us where things might be kind of locked up, or where there might be blockages that could hinder us from being our best selves when it is that we're endeavoring to show up for other people who are dealing with difficult situations. All right. And so we're going to start with a little prayer. All who would like to be able to benefit from this, I just encourage you to join in with this. God, thank you so much that you are the ultimate comforter. That although every single one of us who walks this experience called life as a human being on planet Earth will experience some difficulties along the way. And you charge us to be vessels of love and of light. And I'm so thankful, God, that through the union that we share, through the power of your pure love, that although you're the healer, you bless me to participate in the healing as a vessel. And I'm so thankful for that, and the love that's the tool through which the healing happens. And so I offer myself right now, God, as a vessel of healing, to demonstrate you as a healer on the behalf of, and if you are open to receiving this healing, state your name right now. And I'll state mine, Royce Fletcher Thomas. And all of us who are open and receptive to this healing for the purpose of moving us out of our own discomfort from the point of the causal root and the entire energy field of every strand of DNA in every cell of our bodies, and transmuting that into and replacing it with showing up for others in a way that makes a difference for them, a favorable impact for them, genuinely helps lighten their load, helps them to feel loved and supported in meaningful ways. And I bear witness to our wholeness and our ability to effectively do so on this date and in this time and space called now. Thank you, God. Thank you for this gift of your divine love. It is done. It is done. It is done. All right, so let's get into the actual healing on this. And so let's first address that uncomfortability. And one of the things that's coming up with that is how we tend to chase comfort, which is actually a big block and hindrance in growth, period. I heard Mike Tomlin, the coach, a professional football coach, talk about how he's made a conscious decision not to chase comfort. If there's a difficult situation that's coming up, to move in that direction. We generally move in the opposite. We try to move away from the things that make us feel uncomfortable. But he's grown to embrace what feels uncomfortable. So let's strengthen us in terms of our discomfort with what feels uncomfortable, and our fear of feeling uncomfortable. So we're going to purify that through the power of God's pure love and strengthen us. Which really kind of, when we do that, we're just kind of being punks, being wusses. And I'm not saying that, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. So please understand that. You know, when we do that, we're taking an easy way out. I'll put it that way. We're taking an easy way out, and we're being a little bit cowardly. I mean, that is the reality of the matter. All right. And so let's actually transmute that into and replace it with feeling courageous. Let's strengthen us in terms of feeling courageous. The courageous person is not the person who experiences no fear. The courageous person, you know, we talk about fear as false evidence appearing real. We talk about that a lot in these Sunday Hope and Healing sessions. We talk about that a lot in the Transcending the Matrix training and initiations. We talk about that a lot. But there's another acronym for fear also, in terms we have fear responses in terms of how we might respond or react in fear and in fear-based ways, but also it's appropriate for us to be responsible with fear, or to be able to respond appropriately when fear arises. And that's another acronym: face everything and rise. Rather than running from what makes us feel uncomfortable, what scares us a little bit, what we really try to avoid, rather actually facing the thing that we fear and moving through that uncomfortability, that actually builds our spiritual muscles, makes us lighter in the long run. Even though it might feel a little heavier in the short term, it makes us overall lighter in the long run. Okay. And so that is actually the mark of courage. A person who stands in the face of what makes them feel afraid and moves past it and moves through it anyway. That takes a lot of courage to do that. And that's very respectable. That's very honorable to be able to do that. All right. We recognize and we revere people who do that. We honor people who do the things that we would be too scared to do ourselves, rather than just honoring the people who do things that you're too scared to do. How about us becoming the person who does the thing that everybody else is too scared to do, and in the process perhaps inspires others to be able to garner the courage to do what they would otherwise feel uncomfortable doing. So let's strengthen us all to be able to do that. All right, from really dealing with things in our lower nature, stored within the base of the spine, the coccyx, like the tailbone area. All right, so those foundational things where fear set in, and we learned in our fight for survival to run away from the things that make us feel comfortable. To run away from the things that make us feel uncomfortable. So now let's transmute that into creating a boldness and an intestinal fortitude. Intestinal fortitude is another way of saying having guts, to have the guts to face the thing that might feel a little uncomfortable, that might feel a little bit scary, that might feel a little awkward. Right? If you don't face the awkwardness, you never get the experience of moving through the awkwardness. We talk sometimes about dopamine and how dopamine is actually largely connected to addiction. And what it is that we find cheap ways to get dopamine releases. Dopamine is a hormone that's released into our system that gives us a sense of reward. And so we chase dopamine. We chase dopamine through external things, and then we get hooked on that external thing because it's the way that we get that rush of dopamine. But it's unearned dopamine. we're getting the reward without putting in the work to get the reward. And so we're cheating the system in a way, and the system isn't set up for us to be able to effectively cheat it. Even though we might be able to see 1,000 notifications popping up on our phone and look at them, all the time, giving ourselves a little quick dopamine rush when we get that like on our post or whatever it is, that little quick dopamine rush, or other things that we do to get that dopamine. That's why, even people who are addicted to drugs are called dope heads. Dope isn't the drug that a person is taking. Dope is the drug that's being released within one's own system. Dopamine. Okay. And those other things are triggering that dopamine response. But when you actually engage in the work to cause that dopamine to be released in the proper way, according to how we were divinely designed, that doesn't create the addiction. What that actually creates is fortitude to do more of what actually brings us success. It actually strengthens us and creates new neural pathways within our brains that lead us to have a growth mindset and to do the things that cause us to be successful in life in general. When we're doing things to earn the dopamine, it makes us find the things that we once perceived to be unpleasant to no longer necessarily have that same degree of unpleasantness. And even beyond that, it actually gives us a reward for facing the things that we could have easily just passed up on. But the things that are beneficial for us to do. That's how it was divined by God, for it to actually unfold within us. Not to be checking our phone for likes all the time, or to see who texted you back, or all of these other little things that we kind of get addicted to that we don't even recognize are addictions. All right, so let's strengthen us in terms of our courage to face what feels uncomfortable. Let's kind of redirect our focus for the satisfaction. We're talking about sustainable state of supreme satisfaction. We can't control external things, but we can control how we show up. We can control what it is that we choose to face. So let's strengthen us all to be able to have a natural proclivity to do that which actually generates reasonable reward. When I say reasonable reward, what I mean by that is where you've actually done what was your job to do, and then you get the reward of doing what your job to do was. And I'm not saying this like I was blessed to show up for a friend, this weekend. I wasn't doing that to get accolades or anything. I was doing that because I love my brother and friend. He's my friend and my brother, and I love him. And I wanted to be there for him, genuinely be there for him in a time of need, not for how it would help me, but for how it would help him. In the process of me doing that and facing things that would have felt maybe a little uncomfortable for me, he got benefit from that. His family got benefit from that. But I also did get a benefit from it. I wasn't doing it for the benefit that I was going to get, but I did get benefit from it in terms of it supported me in my journey and who it is and how it is that I want, who it is I want to be, and how it is that I want to show up on the planet. Because each time I get to do something like that, I get to grow. Each time I get to show up for somebody in a way that matters to them without making it about me, I get to become a better person. That's a reward in itself. That's a reward in itself. Now, there were things that were said, affirmatively in terms of, you know, how something that I said or did made a difference, at these different functions where I had responsibilities made a difference for them. And I appreciate that. But that was, of course it feels good to know that you somehow help make life a little better for somebody else. So let's actually address this real quick. Let's address our need to use other people as a means of making ourselves feel better. And how that's not really how I want to word that, because I'm coming back to something I touched on earlier about sometimes we say stuff because we feel uncomfortable with it. It's not really something that's going to help them, but we say it because we feel uncomfortable just sitting with them with that space without really knowing what to say or do. So let's strengthen us in terms of removing the need to know what to say or do. So let's purify that through the power of pure love. And something that's coming up over and over again. I know I said this earlier, but it's coming up in a very strong way for me right now. Sometimes it isn't what we need to do. Sometimes it's what we need to be. And sometimes what we need to be is just a safe space. And sometimes the way that we be a safe space is just by being there. I mean, we may say possibly that we want to be a safe space, but we show people that we're a safe space by how we show up and just being with them without judgment, without trying to talk them out of how they're feeling, without necessarily trying to make them feel better, because there probably isn't anything that we can do to make them feel better. But there is something that we can be in terms of present in a way that allows space for whatever they've got inside to come out. We can't force it to come out. It has to be in their time. They may want to share something. I was in the car yesterday with the grandmother, aunt, and cousin of the young man that just passed. And I asked a question, and it did feel like an appropriate question to ask. Like, what's one of your favorite memories with your grandson? That's a thing that she was very happy to talk about. She was very happy to be able to share that. And it was an appropriate thing to ask in that moment. And you got to kind of feel what moment is the right moment for what particular thing. But it certainly felt like an appropriate thing in that moment. And she lit up and she shared, some stories that were very meaningful for her. And not only that, she then turned to her daughter and asked her daughter to share. And it was a beautiful thing to be able to talk about some pleasant memories that they had with their loved one. And I was glad to be able to be there at that moment and give them space to be able to share that. It wasn't me imposing on them how they should be feeling or anything, or me telling them some spiritual platitude, or even quoting some scripture to them. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy cometh in the morning. You might be feeling bad now, but it's going to get better. Ain't nobody trying to hear that when they're dealing with their difficulty. There are times, there's a time and a season for everything. And that ain't the time and that ain't the season, right? Let's strengthen us all, because I noticed that it is almost 2:00. It's 1:57. Real talk, I would have been completely content to have stayed in the bed pretty much all day today. It was a force of will and my love for you that allowed me to be able to do this Sunday Hope and Healing session at all. And here we are now, almost 2:00. And I feel like I could keep going for a while, quite honestly, at this juncture. But let's actually strengthen us to be able to cultivate love in us in a way that's fluid, and in a way that opens up space. Sometimes we feel uncomfortable dealing with people who are dealing with loss. And we call ourselves giving them space because we really don't know how to deal with them. But there's a difference between that and creating space for a person when you are present with them. So let's strengthen us to be able to actually have the discernment of how to show up for people. And one other thing I want to say, a way that you learn a little bit more, another way you learn more how to show up for people when they're dealing with difficulties is by pay attention to them. Listen to what it is that they're saying. Pay attention to what it is that they're not saying. Observe how it is that they're moving. You know, there's and this friend of mine had one son that passed, they had a whole lot of kids. Has, several that are still around. There was one in particular that I noticed particularly was having a difficult time. And this one particular one I also noticed wasn't at the event yesterday. And I intentionally wanted to lay eyes on him and show up in some kind of way, right? I knew he wasn't going to talk or say anything. I also knew he hadn't eaten. I offered to fix him a plate, try to get a sense of what it was that I'd shared with him what was available, and to get a sense of what it was that he wanted. And to the best of my ability, I put a plate together based on what I, could kind of discern he was interested in eating, and fixed the plate and made the plate for him. That's not anything that's a big deal. But I tell you, it is one of the things that can make a difference. It's a little thing. Sometimes just those little things can make a big difference for people. So let's actually strengthen our observation tools to be able to observe where a person is. Have you ever encountered somebody that just really didn't know how to read the room? Yeah, that's the only person that was having, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. Okay. So let's strengthen us to be able to open up our powers of observation, to be able to see and hear and have clarity and discernment about what it is a person's going through, but also how we might be able to step in and fulfill a need. Okay. For different people, it's different things, and it's different things in different moments. Pardon me, but let's strengthen all of us to be able to have a discerning eye, to be able to observe without having to be the one talking all the time. I can't stress that enough. But to really just be able to pay attention. To be able to pay attention. That's something that we can give to people. We can give them the gift of paying attention to them. And paying attention isn't always, doing the helicopter thing where you're just over them and maybe smothering them. Some people, that is kind of what they may need in a particular moment. Some people, that's not doing anything for them at all. So, just kind of paying attention. Here I am saying that again, paying attention. Pay attention to what it is that a person, observe their body language, observe how they might be moving, their expressions, listen to what it is that they're saying, and govern oneself accordingly. All right, so let's strengthen our ability to be able to pay attention. And again, to be able to authentically hold space with a person and to grow comfortable with the uncomfortable experience of the silence. A lot of times people just feel uncomfortable with silence. And so, need to say something to fill the space. Again, if we're in a position of saying something to fill the space, it is sucking the oxygen out of the room to a certain extent. In other words, it's taking away space that they can have to let out what it is that is going on with them. And again, they may not need to say anything, but just the presence there can make a difference. All right. It is 2:03. I need to get ready to shut this down. We're going to do one or two more adjustments and then we'll close out. So let's deal with our own internal ignorance. Let's purify that through the power of God's pure love. Areas where we're just in the dark about what to do, how to be, how to show up. Let's purify that through the power of pure love. Bring light to the places within us where we're ignorant, where we're in the dark about how to show up and when. All right. Infusing the areas within our own experiences with light, where we just do what people did with us, even if it didn't help us. Sometimes that's what we do. Or sometimes, what we were needing was the opposite of what somebody else did. So we do what we would need in the situation, but that might not necessarily be what somebody else would need in that same situation or a similar situation. So let's see, let's actually strengthen us to shift our perspective from a more myopic view and transmute that and purify that through the power of pure love to and I would say an open view. And by that, what I mean is open to have revealed to you what's actually there beyond what your own preconceived notions or ideas would be. Okay. All righty. And so let's strengthen us to, and this is going to be the last one. Let's strengthen us to be able to love more freely. And when I say love more freely, I want to say that in the context of being free to love in a way where we're not censoring ourselves. And when I mean by that, being free to love in a way where we're not censoring ourselves, what I mean by that is we're loving from a place of just genuine, pure, authentic love, allowing, I say where we're not censoring ourselves, but I think what I really mean is in a way where we're not getting in the way of the love freely flowing. And what I'm really getting at there as being a free, clear, and open vessel for God's love to flow to them, because God knows how they need the love in that moment. being a clear, empty, open vessel for God's love to flow through you in a way that will matter for them. All right, so let's strengthen us all for that. Let's strengthen us all for that. Thank you, God. Thank you, God, so much for this that's come forth today. Thank you for the little bit of healing that's gone forth to energetically help us more fully align to be vessels of your love and your comfort, to be more spiritually discerning, and to be able to step out of our own selves to show up in a way that people actually need us, not based on whatever our own ego is dictating, but in a way that they're actually needing to be shown up for, that will actually make a difference in their lives. God, thank you for all that you've done to further strengthen and empower us in those areas, and ultimately helping us to be better versions of ourselves and to be pure vessels of your love and your light in the earth realm. Thank you for these and all other blessings. In Yeshem Hashua Hamashiach Hashay and Amen. All right, family. I love you, beloved. I'm glad to see my mother in the space today. I love you, Ma. And to everybody who's been here with us, as always, from my heart to yours, I'm sending a bunch of it out in your direction and looking forward to, in a couple weeks, less than 2 weeks. Actually, we'll be ending 2 weeks today. The Transcending the Matrix Level 2 Intermediate Training on Mental and Emotional Healing, Neurological Upgrading, and Brain Optimization. This is a time where mental health is so crucially important for all of us, because the world seems to be going crazy. And so mental health is so crucially important for all of us. A lot of people are experiencing loss right now and need support. This mental and emotional healing, neurological upgrading, brain optimization, this is so needed today. Now, people do have to be already initiated in the Transcending the Matrix system to benefit from this. But I am thankful to be able to help share these tools with more people that can actually be able to reach more people. Anyway, that's it for today. As we can continue to endeavor to enter into the sustainable state of supreme satisfaction until we meet again, I bid you adieu with peace and love. Catch you next time.